Hallway of Shadows. If there's one thing I've learned in my years of vending at conventions, it's that you follow the crowd. The folks who've been there before have already made all of the mistakes for you. As long as you're smart, enough to learn from those who came before, you don't have to make those mistakes over again. If you see the other vendors bringing in fans, you'd better go get a little desk fan for your table, or you're going to be suffering an inadequate AC. If everyone's avoiding a specific food truck, it doesn't matter how popular it is with the attendees. You stay away if you're smart. More than anything else, it's important to just go with everyone else during setup and teardown. You might think you've spotted a shortcut, but the tables who've been vending this convention for years almost certainly know something you don't know. Maybe that convenient elevator moves at a snail's pace. Maybe those nearby stairs are dangerously low friction. Maybe that door to the parking lot has an alarm that goes off if you prop it open for too long. Whatever the reason, if no one's using an easier path, it's because that path isn't actually easier. You can believe those who already know, or you can become one more who had to learn the hard way. There are always a few who have to see for themselves. At this convention, that was Partha. He had comic books for sale, long boxes densely packed with carefully sleeved issues. He was setting up at the table next to mine and laughed when he saw me wheeling my bins all the way from the doors at the front of the convention hall. "Man, you went the long way around, huh?" "It's where everyone was going," I said, waving at the stream of vendors behind me. Seemed the best way not to get lost or stuck somewhere. "Nope. See that door 20 feet behind us? Opens to a hallway that goes straight to the parking lot. Can't be 100 feet from here to the door of my car. How far did you have to walk, like a quarter mile?" I looked back across the convention hall. It was at least 200 feet just from the doors. And before that, I'd had to wind through a couple of corridors and cross the lobby. And that was all after the parking lot. Probably not a quarter mile, but maybe a tenth. Certainly much more than the 100 feet Partha was boasting about. "Must be a reason no one else is going through there," I said. "Maintenance hallway, maybe?" "Could be, we're supposed to. Keep it clear." "They haven't marked it if so," he said. "Nothing on or in it but that stupid sign." A piece of paper had been taped to the door with the handwritten words, "Hallway of Shadows." It was stuck down with wide strips of transparent packing tape, fully covering the paper and fastening it securely to the metal of the door. Whoever had put it there had wanted to make sure it didn't come free. "Sounds like a sideshow exhibit," I said. Partha shrugged. "Nothing in there but an empty back corridor. Nothing stored, nothing staged. It just looks like a rusty emergency door from the parking lot side. I figured it'd be locked, so I was stoked when it opened and turned out to be the most convenient way in. I guess no one else thought to try the door." "I guess," I said. It did seem much more convenient, but I knew that later I'd find Partha locked out or locked in, or looking for the number of the lot that had towed his car or something. If there was an easier way that wasn't being used, then it wasn't actually easier. I knew that was true even if I didn't know why in this case. All day long that door stayed shut. I saw a few folks walk toward it, only to be shooed away by the vendors nearby. I couldn't make out the conversations, so eventually when I had a slow moment, I walked over to ask for myself. "What's with the Hallway of Shadows? We allowed to use that or what?" "Nah, it's got an alarm on it," said the man at the booth. His name tag identified him as Norman. His tired attitude confirmed what I'd seen. He'd been telling people this all day. I gestured back toward my booth. "Partha says it was fine this morning." The change in Norman's attitude was abrupt and intense. "He went through it? What time?" "Load in, so like 7, I guessed. Way too late," he muttered. "Might have been cloudy enough still." "Maybe." He looked down the row to where Partha sat, happily arguing with an attendee about the condition of one of the comics. He shook his head. "Guess we'll see," he said, again mostly under his breath. "See what?" My question startled him, as if he was surprised I was still there. Nothing. We'll see if, There was a silent alarm. If the fire marshal comes. If he doesn't, then I suppose he got away with it." "Suppose so," I said. I wasn't sure what was going on here, but it was pretty clear that I wasn't going to get any further answers. I started to walk away. "Hey," Norman called after me. "Don't go through that hallway, though, in case they turned the alarm back on." I gave him a thumbs up. I could see someone approaching my table and looking around for the vendor. I hurried back to catch them before they wandered past. The more games I sold this weekend, the less I had to pack back up at the end. Money was nice in the abstract, but getting to do less manual labor was always my more immediate motivating factor during these conventions. The strangest thing was that at the end of the day, once they locked the vendor hall and we were all going home through the night, I saw plenty of people going out through the hallway of shadows. It was a strange pattern, though. They only ever entered the door one at a time. Each person closed it behind them, even if they were with other people. The next person would open it immediately, so it wasn't like they were waiting for the first one to make it down the hall. It was an inversion of the standard societal custom of holding the door for the person before you. When entering the hallway of shadows, everyone made sure to shut the door firmly in the face of whoever might be behind. Except Partha, of course. He gestured me toward the door as we were leaving. "Look, let me show you how much shorter this way is." He opened the door and held it for me. "Shoot, it's pitch black in there. Is there a light switch?" "There isn't," called a slightly panicked voice from inside. "Look, if you're coming through, then come on. It's just a straight shot to the far side. It's like 20 feet. You don't need lights. The left wall's clear if you need to keep your hand on something. Come on, don't hang around." In the doorway. The whole speech was delivered in a rush. We couldn't see the speaker. Partha and I shrugged and stepped inside. The door swung shut behind us. The hallway wasn't quite as dark as it had seemed. The left wall was lined with windows near the ceiling, and although they let in only a little dim light from the night sky, it was enough to see by. There was a figure at the far end. "Come on, this way," she said. I walked toward the speaker, trailing my hand along the wall as he had suggested. As we drew close, he opened the far door. It led directly to the lot where I had parked this morning, just as Partha had said. We all stepped out onto the sidewalk, and the woman closed the door behind us. "So what's with everyone else?" said Partha. "What do you mean?" she said. "In the hallway. They're just chilling out there." The woman had an expression on her face that at the time I read as confusion. There wasn't anyone else in there. Partha gave a half laugh, as if he thought she was telling a joke. Yes, there was. It had to be like half the vendor hall lined up in there against the far wall. I mean, it was hard to see in there, but there were definitely a bunch of people. He looked to me for confirmation, but I could only shrug. I didn't notice anyone. Maybe you've got better night vision than I do. They were definitely there. He reopened the door to the same impenetrable darkness. "Hello?" He flipped on his phone flashlight and shone it into the hallway. It was narrow and empty. There was nothing to hide behind. There was no one there. "I swear," started Partha. He stopped, then suddenly turned around as if he thought they had gotten behind him somehow. There was no one there but the vendor we had met in the hallway of shadows, who flinched away from his light, as if it were dangerous. "Close the door," she said, "and don't ever bring a light in there." She hurried off before we could ask any questions. Partha and I stared at each other for a moment. "Definitely some sort of a prank," he said. His car was closer than mine, but he was still sitting in it when I left the parking lot. He was staring at the door as if he still expected all those people he had seen to come pouring out. I saw him startle when my headlights panned over him. He gave me a sheepish wave as I drove away. The next morning, I parked in the same lot. I eyeballed the door, which was not marked at all from this side. I thought about taking the shortcut inside. I told myself it was probably locked, that the alarm was probably turned back on. I walked the long way around. Partha was at his table by the time I arrived. "Getting your morning hike in, I see. Could have just come through the hallway like I did." "No one waiting in there for you this morning?" I joked. He laughed, but it sounded a little strained. "I'll be honest, that weirded me out. I dreamed about it last night. I was here in the convention center, but no matter which door I opened to get out, it led to that hallway. It was always pitch black, but never empty. I could always tell the darkness was full, although I didn't know of what. And every door led to that hallway, Not just a similar one, the same one, like it was there ahead of me. The laughter vanished from his voice as he described the dream, replaced by desperation and fear. I must have been staring because when he met my eyes, he forced a smile back onto his face. Anyway, how'd sales go for you yesterday? Shelves are still looking pretty full, but we should be getting the main crowds today, yeah? Hey, if you need to talk about... I began. Partha cut me off. Nah, I'm sorry I brought it up. I just met you yesterday. I didn't mean to turn you into my convention therapist. Come on, let's talk shop. Did you make back your table fee yet? I let him steer the conversation away to safer territory, but I wondered what exactly he thought he'd seen in that hallway. It was clear it had rattled him if it was still weighing on his mind under the harsh white glare of the convention hall lighting. I'd been spooked by shadows plenty of times, but it always seemed silly the following day. He didn't seem to be experiencing the same relief. As the day went on, Partha got jumpier and jumpier. I regularly caught him suddenly snapping, his head to one side or the other as if he had spotted a sudden movement in his peripheral vision. He spent a lot of time looking under the drapery covering his table and around the corner of the fabric divider behind him. And over again, I found him staring at the closed door of the hallway of shadows. Something over there? I asked him at one point. He gave me the same sheepish grin I'd seen the previous night. Nah, just thought I saw something is all. Around noon, he pulled the drape over his comics and asked me to keep an eye on his table for a couple of minutes while he ducked out to get a sandwich. I agreed, but didn't really pay too much attention to it. I had my own flow of customers to attend to. Anyone who wanted to steal anything would have to move the drape aside first, and I figured I was bound to notice something that large. A few minutes later, I almost jumped out of my skin when Partha hissed at me from the corner of my booth. He was crouched down, hidden behind a wire rack filled with games. I could only see his wide eyes and the top of his head. "Who's in my chair?" he whispered. I turned to look. The seat was empty. No one. "No one's touched your stuff the whole time you were gone," I said. His eyes darted past me, staring through the wire rack at his seat. "There's no one there?" I looked again as if somehow I might have missed a person occupying the chair. There was no one. I shook my head. Partha slowly rose from behind the rack, his gaze fixed on the chair the entire time. His eyes widened even further as he cleared the low rack and gained an unobstructed view of the empty chair. "Someone was there," he said. "I saw them through the rack and then they were just gone." "Where would they have gone?" I asked. "Away," he said. His eyes flicked wildly from side to side. "I hope." He started to crouch down as if to peer through the rack again, then vacillated, wobbling back and forth on his toes. "Hey, I said. "Can you go back to your table? I need to keep the space open for the folks who are buying stuff." "Yeah," said Partha. Sorry. He skulked past, peering under his chair before flopping down into it. He drummed his fingers on the table before him. He looked underneath it. He did not uncover the comics. He seemed reluctant to touch the drape. I turned my back slightly to him and tried to focus on my customers instead of his unsettling movements. The next time I looked over, he was gone. I hadn't heard him leave. His chair hadn't been pushed back from the table. I glanced underneath, but there was nothing there but a few cardboard boxes tucked out of the way. The sandwich he had gone to get still sat there with only 2 bites out of it. I told myself that he must have gone to get a drink, or to the bathroom, or something else normal. But the minutes slipped by, turning slowly into hours, and Partha never returned. His table of comics remained shrouded all through the Saturday rush. A few people asked if I knew when he'd be back. I could only shrug. Eventually, the flow of shoppers slowed to a trickle, and then even those last few were herded out as they closed the vendor hall for the night. I closed up my booth, looking over at Partha's abandoned table as I did so. The sandwich was still there. Partha had never returned. I should have taken the long way around on the way out. I should never have gone back through that hallway. But I told myself I was being absurd, that I was jumping at shadows like Partha had been. I armed myself with my rationality and took the shortcut back to my car. As the door to the hallway of shadows shut behind me, I heard a quiet noise, barely louder than the whisper of air from the closing door. I thought it might have been my name. Partha? I asked, and I did something unfathomably stupid. I took out my phone. I turned on the flashlight. For a moment, an instant, the light merely illuminated the dark. The room was still pitch black, but now I was looking at it. Then the darkness scattered like cockroaches, not disappearing as it should have in light, but scuttling away in 10,000 shivering pieces. It fled, but only as far as my light reached. I could feel it gathered at the edges. The hallway was empty, nothing but plain white walls and a cement floor. My own shadow stretched out across it, reaching for the exit to the parking lot. I walked forward, watching that shadow climb the wall and flow over the door, and only then did it occur. To me, I was holding the light in front of myself. So what then was casting the shadow? I bolted. I leapt across those last few feet to the door, cringing as the shadow silently roared up in front of me. But when my shoulder slammed into the metal door, it flew open, dumping me onto the sidewalk. By the parking lot, the shadows outside were only shadows. The hallway behind me was just a hallway. I slammed the door shut and repeated this to myself. There was nothing wrong. It was all a trick of the light. I kept the interior lights on in my car as I drove to my hotel, but still I felt there was something in the back seat. I turned on every light in the room when I arrived, but the corners, closets, and spaces I could not see into taunted me. And when I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of the hallway of shadows. It was not everywhere, as it had been in Partha's dream, not at first. Only some of the doors I opened led to the hallway. I still had places I could go, places I could run, but the more doors I went through, the more of them opened onto that hallway. Until at last I found myself in the convention hall, surrounded by dozens of doors on every side, and behind every single one was the hallway. I stood there in the center of the room, paralyzed by fear, and then every door began to slowly swing open at once. The darkness poured forth thick and viscous as syrup and dragged me away into eternal night. I woke up screaming. The lights were all still on. I was alive, untouched, for now. I thought about getting in my car and driving away. I thought about leaving my booth next to Partha's shrouded collection and letting them tell whatever stories they might. If I thought I could escape the hallway, I would have tried. But already I see the movement in the shadows around me, the things darting closer every time I look away. Already, I can feel them closing in. One way or another, I will end up in the dark, in the hallway, forever. The town that never was. In the quiet and otherwise uninteresting part of the country where I grew up, there is an old urban legend involving the small town of Tartarus, an isolated and unincorporated community that apparently once existed on the far western boundary of our county. I say apparently because there is no official record of the town ever existing. It doesn't appear on Google Maps and isn't listed in any of the records held in the state archives. In fact, you won't find Tartarus mentioned in most of the local history books or road maps, except for the occasional reference in long, outdated texts, which historians and local authorities dismiss as errors. Still, these obscure records do exist if one digs deep enough. The government may deny its existence, but that's just the official position. Many living in the county claim to remember Tartarus all too well. Those of the older generations are more likely to recall the small settlement, or at least have fleeting memories of it. I've spoken with many who remember visiting the town during their childhood, and some who claim to have had friends or distant relatives who lived there. There's other evidence too, like the fact that an old, disused road runs through the western hills and then stops in the middle of nowhere. No one in a position of authority can explain why the road was constructed, but oddly enough, it leads directly to the spot where Tartarus was rumored to have been located. So the question remained, if Tartarus did once exist, what the hell happened to it? Well, that's the mystery. Those who remember the town can't recall any mention of it past the late 70s. It's the oddest thing, and is often cited as the perfect example of the Mandela effect. There were theories about what might have occurred, most of them outlandish and far-fetched. Growing up, I heard stories of mass alien abductions and secret government experiments gone wrong. Honestly, I had no idea of the truth. but I was fascinated by the story of Tartarus from a young age. During my teenage years, I often asked my parents to borrow the car so I could drive up there and investigate, but Mom and Dad were dead against it, and my father warned there'd be hell to pay if I went against his wishes. I moved out of state once I turned 18, living in the city and making a life for myself. I never forgot about the Tartarian mystery, however, as the legend of the missing town continued to fascinate me. I only returned home twice in the years that followed, first when my mother passed away, and again when my dad died less than 2 years later. I stayed for some time after my father's passing, organizing the funeral and putting his estate in order. I worked through my grief during this time, but realized I probably would never visit this part of the world again. And so, I decided to take the opportunity to finally visit the fabled site of Tartarus. I don't really know what I expected to find out there. It may sound like a cliché, but what I discovered at the cursed location changed my life forever. I loaded up my father's pickup truck early that morning, bringing with me supplies and items I thought I might need for my amateur investigation, including a full water tank, a shovel, a metal detector, and a vintage road map from the 50s, which erroneously marked the location of Tartarus on the unincorporated western side of the county. It was a 4-hour drive out to the site, most of it along back roads and through flat countryside and endless cornfields. I stopped at a gas station en route, inquiring at the counter about the Tartarian legend. The younger girl behind the cash register rolled her eyes at the mere mention of the lost town, laughing dismissively while insisting it was nothing more than an old wives' tale. But as I went to leave, an older man caught up with me at the pumps and gave a very different account. The old-timer insisted Tartarus was real and that he'd visited the town many times during his youth. But he strongly advised me not to pursue the mystery and definitely not to travel to the site. Some things are beyond our understanding, he insisted, and they're best left that way. Perhaps I should have listened to him, but I'd waited so long and needed to discover the truth for myself. And so I drove on. It wasn't far after the gas station when I needed to leave the main road and drive down the unmarked throughway that led to the Tartarus site. The abandoned road was rough, unmaintained, and full of potholes, but it was just about passable. According to my old map, the disused road led through the Dante Hills across a dried-up riverbed and ended at the town itself. There was a problem, however. I was still about 1.5 miles from my location when I found it impossible to drive on, as the road had been dug up and was impassable. By the look of it, somebody had deliberately dug a trench to prevent any vehicles from passing. This was an obvious red flag, and I really should have given up on my foolhardy quest, turned around, and driven home. But I was so close now, less than 2 miles from the site of the fabled lost town. And so, I got out of the truck and proceeded, on foot. I climbed over the first hill, sweating under the late morning sun but feeling a surge of excitement as I pursued my lifelong obsession. Next, I strode across the old riverbed, noting a substantial thorn tree that sat in the center of the shallow valley. Finally, I walked up the second hill, following my old map to the letter and truly believing that Tartarus stood on the far side. My heart raced as the adrenaline pumped through my veins. The anticipation was considerable. But when I reached the top of the hill and looked down, I saw nothing. Nothing except for an empty grass field where the old road ended. No town, no buildings or even ruins. No evidence that there was ever a settlement at this location. I experienced a great disappointment as I walked down the hillside to investigate the field in closer detail, hoping against hope that I'd find some evidence of the lost town, but I found nothing. Not a trace brick or stone, no signs of human habitation whatsoever. I sighed deeply before turning away from the abandoned field and climbing back up the hill. The hot midday sun was right above me now, and I decided to take shelter beneath the mighty thorn tree, lying down against the trunk and taking a large swig from my water bottle. I sat for several minutes, frustrated at the failure of my quest, but enjoying the peace and tranquility of the scene, with nothing but birdsong and the chirps of crickets to interrupt the silence. I remember thinking how grateful I was to have this moment of solitude. I hadn't found Tartarus, but at least now I knew the truth, and I could rest easy knowing the town was indeed a myth. I continued to relax under the shade of the tree, but suddenly something unexpected and horrifying occurred. The soil beneath me started to collapse and my body began to sink into the ground. I awoke hours later, apparently in the same spot where I'd started out, back under the thorn tree in that riverbed. The sun had moved in the sky, and when I checked my watch, I discovered it was late in the afternoon. Checking my body, I saw no signs of the roots that had previously wrapped themselves around me. This made no sense. Had I imagined the entire incident? Was it all a dream? I didn't want to be here any longer. Something about this place wasn't right. Pulling myself up on shaking feet, I decided to return to my car and drive home. But something very weird happened. As soon as I started trekking up the eastern hill, I began to feel lightheaded, and then my eyes rolled back and everything went black. A second later, I was back under the damn thorn tree, right where I'd started. I must have repeated the same ritual 5 or 6 times, and the same thing happened on each occasion. Every time I walked halfway up the hill before losing consciousness, only to awaken back at the tree. I started to panic in that moment as I didn't understand what was happening to me. It defied all logic or rational explanation. I physically couldn't return to my car the way I'd come. It was as if there were an invisible barrier preventing me from proceeding. Shaking my head in disbelief, I tried to control my anxiety and come up with a new plan. For whatever reason, I couldn't go east. Perhaps I could walk westward and circle around. And so, this is what I attempted to do. I climbed over the hill to the west and was relieved when I didn't pass out. But once I reached the top and looked down, I got the shock of my life. Because I was no longer standing over an empty grass field. Instead, I was observing a small but bustling town, consisting of a large municipal building, a row of tidy stores, and a scattering of houses surrounded by white picket fences, all set along a narrow, paved road. I could even see people walking up and down the main street, men in jeans and women in summer dresses, all going about their business with seemingly not a care in the world. For a long moment, I just stood there on the hillside, frozen in shock as I stared down at the impossible settlement. I was nervous and more than a little frightened, but I'll admit to feeling a surge of excitement, because I'd finally solved the great mystery after all these long years. The town of Tartarus was real, and I'd found it. Obviously, the whole situation was very bizarre and unnerving. I should have proceeded with caution, but my curiosity got the better of me as I slowly walked down the hillside toward the small town. I was filled with a strange enthusiasm as I strolled along the paved street, closely observing everything around me. What I saw was a tidy and well-kept small town, with electric lamps and flower pots lining both sides of the road. There were several stores with neat windows and advertisements for bargains on fresh food and homemade clothes. The whole place looked like a throwback to a previous era, right down to the quaint town hall halfway up the street. A white building with Roman-style columns at its front, and an old but carefully maintained flag flapping in the light wind. There was something quite charming about the little settlement of Tartarus, but I was so awestruck that I missed the obvious warning signs. As I proceeded along the street, the residents stopped whatever they were doing and stared in my direction. I spotted an old man sitting on a bench, a young girl crossing the street, and a middle-aged woman peering out from the window of her store. Their eyes were all fixed upon me, not with curiosity but with fear and loathing. I waved and smiled in an attempt to show I wasn't a threat, but it only made them angrier. I felt increasingly uncomfortable under all those hostile gazes. Clearly, they saw me as an intruder in their hometown and I wasn't welcome. But it got worse. As I came closer to the town hall, I became aware of a foul smell, something akin to rotting flesh. A cold dread gripped me as I slowly approached the building, looking up to witness a scene of gory horror. A dead man was hanging beneath the columns, strung up by the neck with a crude sign pinned to his ragged shirt. Clearly, the man had been dead for some time. His skin had turned gray, and buzzards and insects had picked at his rotting flesh. It was a horrifying and disgusting scene, but perhaps the most chilling detail was the sign attached to his chest, which read, "He broke the rules and paid the price." I backed away in revulsion, retching as I resisted the urge to vomit onto the street. I realized then that I was in considerable danger. I needed to get the hell out of this town, but it was already too late, as word of my presence had spread. I turned to see half a dozen men approaching from the far side of the street, their eyes full of anger and malice. One burly, bald-headed man wore a tan shirt with a sheriff's badge pinned to his chest and carried a hunting rifle aimed directly at my head. Another 4 men followed close behind, armed with bats and clubs. The 6th man, perhaps the most disturbing, wore a neat dark suit and had the cold, focused eyes of a predator. I didn't attempt to run as the dark-suited man pushed his way to the front of the mob and shouted toward me in a raspy but commanding voice. "You there! What the hell are you doing in our town?" I was frozen under his accusatory glare, fearing to speak in case I said the wrong thing. Eventually, I managed to splutter out a reply in what I hoped was a conciliatory tone. "Sir, I am a visitor from the eastern side of the county. I've been searching for your town for some time. I don't mean any harm." "I'll be the judge of that," the man shot back aggressively. "I am the mayor of Tartarus, and it's my responsibility to look after the townsfolk. We don't care for outsiders around here. People like you come in and disrupt the equilibrium. Do you know what I mean?" I nodded, replying calmly as I tried not to escalate the situation. "I must apologize, sir," I said meekly. "Clearly, I made a mistake in coming here." I glanced fearfully at the body hanging above the town hall's front door. "I'll get going and leave you good folk in peace." The mayor smiled sadistically before muttering his answer. "I'm afraid it's too late for that." As soon as he finished speaking, the armed men charged forward. I cried out and tried to fight them, but the mob beat me down with their clubs, kicking me to the pavement before dragging my limp body up and frog-marching me toward the town hall. "Put him in the cells with the other traitor," the mayor ordered. "We'll deal with them both in the morning." His men complied, dragging me across the street under the rotting corpse and into the building. From there, I was taken down into some kind of basement, passing an ominous locked room before arriving at a small, windowless cell. They roughly tossed me inside before slamming and locking the door. It took me a moment to regain my senses and realize I wasn't alone in the cell. A young woman emerged from under a blanket, her face pale and drawn, her dark hair a mess of knots. Her eyes were red and puffy. I reckoned she'd been crying uncontrollably for days. But a spark of hope came into her tired eyes when she saw me, and she sat up, addressing me in an excited voice. "Who are you, and how did you get here?" I did my best to explain my situation to the young lady, telling my story and hoping she wouldn't think I was crazy. But the woman listened to every word with intense interest, waiting until I finished before speaking. "My name is Laura," she said. "The body you saw hanging out front, that was my brother, Michael. We were both born and raised in this town, lived here our whole lives." I heard the pain in her words and struggled to respond. "Why did they kill him?" I eventually asked. "Because he asked questions," Laura shot back angrily. "We both did. You see, a long time ago, our town was cut off from the rest of the world. No one knows how exactly, but the beast beneath our feet took control of Tartarus and its people. It brought us here to this bubble universe, trapped us, and made sure we could never leave. The mayor and his supporters insist we worship the monster like a god, that we do everything it wants and never question our existence here. Michael and I planned to get out, but we got caught." She sighed deeply before continuing. "Michael always believed there was a link between this place and the outside world, but we could never find it. But you did. The thorn tree, that's the portal, that's our way out." I shook my head, trying to process the ton of almost unbelievable information I'd just heard. "But what good does this do us if we're locked in here?" I asked. Laura took a deep breath, intensely gripping my hand and looking me directly in the eye. "We need to escape. I couldn't do it before, but the two of us have a chance if we work together." I frowned, not feeling confident about Laura's plan. "It's very risky," I said. "We have to try," Laura shot back. "Because tomorrow they're going to hang me, and probably kill you too. The mayor will stop at nothing to maintain the status quo. Escape is our only chance. We have to get across to your world." Several hours passed as we sat waiting to execute our plan. There was no window in our underground cell, but I guessed that day had turned to night. We waited in tense silence, preparing ourselves. There was one thing I still couldn't comprehend. What was the beast below? Who or what was the monster that had taken control of Tartarus and its people, somehow transporting the entire town to this pocket dimension? I asked Laura to explain, but she said it was better if I didn't know, that I should focus instead on our escape. The opportunity came that evening when the guard arrived with our dinner. I saw the scar-faced, mean-eyed man appear at the cell door carrying trays of food. He snarled sadistically and said, "Okay, assholes, wakey, wakey, it's time for your last meal." I took a deep breath before speaking, hoping the guard was dumb enough to fall for our crude trick. "The girl is sick," I said, pointing to the bed. "She hasn't moved in hours. I think she might be dying." "Horse shit," the guard replied dismissively. "I'm serious. You need to check on her," I shouted. Laura remained motionless under the blankets while the guard groaned, set down the food trays, and reached for his keys. "You there?" he barked, pointing at me. "Stand against the wall and keep your hands where I can see them." Did as ordered, watching carefully as the foul-mouthed guard opened the cell door and made his way to the bed. He grabbed the blanket with his filthy hand, but Laura was ready, springing up and striking the man hard across the nose before throwing the blanket over his head. "You bitch," the guard screamed, struggling to regain his sight. He eventually pulled the blanket off, but I was on top of him, forcing him down to the ground and locking him in a tight chokehold. The guard fought hard, but Laura helped me hold him down, and finally he lost consciousness, lying motionless on the hard floor. Laura quickly grabbed the keys and baton before rushing to the cell door. "Come on, we don't have much time," she exclaimed. I followed her out into the corridor as we made for the staircase, but I paused, noticing how a previously locked door was now open. Strange, wet slurping sounds and pained groans echoed from within. Laura shouted for me to ignore it and continue our escape, but curiosity got the better of me. I'd come so far and taken so many risks. I needed to know the truth about Tartarus. Slowly and cautiously, I pushed the heavy door open, stepping inside. 3 people lay unconscious inside the windowless room, strapped down to gurneys secured to the concrete floor. They were 2 women and 1 man of indeterminable age, pale, thin, and barely alive. But what truly horrified me were the black, snake-like appendages attached to their arms, slimy, thick tentacles draining blood from their motionless bodies. My jaw dropped in horror as my eyes followed the blood-sucking tentacles downwards, seeing how they emerged from 3 wide holes dug into the concrete floor. All were presumably connected to a much larger creature lurking below. I was so shocked and disgusted that I didn't notice Laura entering the room until she spoke, her voice low and heavy with sorrow. "I told you not to look," she said softly. "But at least now you know the truth." Suddenly, we heard a third voice from behind us. We swung around in surprise to see the mayor standing in the doorway, covering us with a silver revolver in his right hand. "Yes, congratulations," he said sarcastically, glaring at me. "You've found the secret of Tartarus, and no doubt you're disgusted by our actions. But answer me this, stranger. What would you have done in our situation?" He gestured toward the gurneys. "The beast beneath our feet keeps our town safe. It keeps the lights on and supplies our food and water. Everything we need is provided, and all we must give in return is a little bit of ourselves." He waved the revolver lazily. "Not such a bad deal, is it?" he added. I was left speechless by the terrifying revelation, but Laura angrily stepped forward. "You've allowed your own people to become food for a monster. It's evil," she cried. The mayor snarled in annoyance. "You've caused enough trouble with your dangerous views, young lady. Now the 2 of you are going back in the cell. Don't try anything or I'll shoot you where you stand." I stared down the barrel of his gun, seeing no way out, but fate intervened. One of the prisoners, a woman, suddenly stirred, crying out and sitting up on her gurney. The mayor's attention snapped toward her. I seized the opportunity, darting forward and grabbing at his gun. The mayor pulled the trigger, but the shot went wide, slamming into the ceiling. We struggled fiercely. Laura joined in, charging forward, with a furious cry and striking the mayor hard on the head with the stolen baton. The old man crumpled to the ground, blood pouring from a gash on his skull. "Get his gun," Laura shouted. I grabbed the discarded revolver and together we sprinted for the staircase. Soon we burst out of the town hall's front doors and onto the street, now illuminated by electric lights. Laura took one last mournful glance at her brother's hanging body but didn't dwell. There was nothing we could do for Michael now. Our escape hadn't gone unnoticed. I heard townsfolk shouting and the sound of heavy boots pounding the pavement. But we ignored them. We ran down the street up the western hillside into the darkness. Our frantic dash brought us over the hill and back into the riverbed. I fought to control my panic as I searched the shadows for the thorn tree. Finally, I found it, looming and twisted against the night sky. "It's here," I cried, dragging Laura toward it. I didn't have a magic word to activate the portal. Desperation took over as I stomped wildly on the ground beneath the trunk, shouting in frustration when nothing happened. The pursuers were almost upon us. I could see their dark silhouettes closing in. "Damn it, do something," Laura screamed. I didn't know what else to try. And then, miraculously, the same process that had brought me here repeated itself. My feet sank into the earth and the tree's roots curled around my legs, pulling me down into the soil. "It's working. Come on." I reached out, grabbing Laura's hand, but then came the sharp crack of a rifle. Laura's body jerked violently as the bullet tore through her back. She collapsed into my arms. I came to beneath the thorn tree, with the moon shining down upon me. The riverbed was quiet and empty. Our pursuers were gone. I could only assume we had made it back to my world, but my relief was short-lived. When I looked at Laura, I saw the life had left her eyes. She was no longer breathing. I stayed with her until dawn, cradling her cold body in my arms as I grieved for the young woman. I had only known her for a short time, but I owed her my life. I would never forget her bravery. There was no way I could explain Laura's death to the authorities. Her killer was back in the pocket dimension, and Laura had never officially existed in our world. All I could do was give her a decent burial. Using the shovel from my truck, I dug a grave on the eastern hillside, just beyond the boundaries of the Tartarian prison she had fought so hard to escape. I laid her to rest under the rising sun, whispering a silent prayer for her soul. With the grim task done, I left that cursed place, driving back toward civilization with a story no one would ever believe. I've tried to continue my life and forget about the ugly incident, but it's proved impossible. I haven't been able to sleep since it happened. Every time I close my eyes, I see Michael's hanging corpse, Laura's dead eyes, and those vile tentacles leeching the life from innocent victims. I can't rest, knowing the evil that still festers on the other side of that gateway. And I'm the only one who can stop it. So I'm going back to the thorn tree and over the hillside. But this time I'll be ready. I will arm myself with guns, ammunition, and gas canisters. Because I'm going to end the nightmare of Tartarus, or die trying. It's my destiny. I really hope you're not in there, I thought. Please don't be in there. My gut told me to check, but I didn't want to. I'd heard talk of alligators being in there, and the creek leading to the sewers. I'd watched way too many horror movies to go pushing my way through there, where no one would see me get dragged off and eaten or butchered. Hell no. Nope. Sorry. Not me. Not tonight. If we couldn't find Valerie anywhere else, then Debbie and I could go inspect the reeds together, loudly, and in that case, I would be glad to scare off anything or anyone in hiding. Shoo, get out of here. You can't eat us. We're just kids. The crow flew past me in a wild flurry of wings, and I hadn't seen it coming, so I yelped, immediately covering my mouth in embarrassment. It landed on the school roof and looked at me. I glared back at the creature and said quietly but forcefully, "Not cool, bro. Not cool." My hands gripped the handle of the baseball bat more tightly. The shadows started playing tricks on me. I kept thinking I saw Valerie or someone lying in the grass or leaning against the brick siding of the building. When I got closer, bat raised high and ready to strike. I always found nothing. The reeds continued to whistle and whisper, and I wanted nothing more than to just find Valerie and go home. I wanted to get away from that place, not just for this moment, but forever. I decided right then and there that I hated that school and I was glad I never attended it. What would they have that creek and those big, tall, scary reeds behind an elementary school anyway? It didn't make a lick of sense to me. There's no way it wasn't a safety hazard. If a little kid wandered away from their class and went in there, no one would see them. Even if they didn't get snatched like my mind immediately went to, they could have just as easily fallen into the creek and gotten swept away in the current, slapping them against filthy mossy rocks and dragging them down into the sewers or wherever that thing led to. It was definitely a terrible design, I decided. If I still lived there when I grew up, I declared to myself that I would never send my kids there. I don't live there anymore. I moved away long before I had any kids, so that prophecy came true, I suppose. I felt my skin crawling as if ants were running all over it. If Valerie had left before we did to go there, we should have at least seen her walking up like we saw each other. She should have been there somewhere. Then I got a terrible thought. What if he did meet her there with his car? What if he saw us or someone else and decided to drive away with her and take her to a different but equally terrifying part of town? I had to find Debbie. We had to page Valerie and see if she called back. If we could get a hold of her, that was a good sign. Surely if she had been abducted by some evil guy, he wouldn't let her go to a payphone and call her friends back. Or even if she managed to sneak away to call us, and he found her and got angry, she could tell us where she was, and we could run there. All the worst thoughts ran through my mind of places he could have taken her and parked the car for absolute privacy, and the terrible things he could be doing to her on this dark autumn night. I said a quiet prayer to God as I looped around and approached the bench from the other side. Debbie was already there, sitting on it and twirling her baseball bat before her while she waited for me. "Nothing?" I asked as I walked up, hugging myself more against the fear than the cold. She shook her big poof of hair. "Nope, not a thing. Maybe she changed her mind and decided not to come. Or maybe he chose this place because no one would see, and when she did come, he stuffed her in the car and took her to a different creepy spot where he could have his way with her or kill her or God knows what else," I said in a panic. "Shoot, you're right," Debbie said with a frown. "They could be anywhere." "Do you know her number by heart?" I asked. "Of course," she said with a psh sound. "That's my homegirl. She's been part of my posse since grade school. Can you find a payphone and call her? We need to know, and we can't know for sure without trying to get a hold of her." "Word. I'll go page her and see if she calls me back. Stay here in case she shows up or we missed her and she's here somewhere and cries for help." I nodded. "You got it. Try to be quick though, okay? This place gives me the creeps." She nodded and turned without a word to run up Mornov. A moment later, I was staring at the dark school, and something tapped me on the shoulder. I jumped and heard laughter. When I looked, Debbie was beside me. "Sorry, dude. I need a quarter." Cursing. Under my breath, I dug in my pocket until I fished out several quarters. I always kept some on me, just in case. My mother had anxiety, so I was always raised to plan ahead and be ready for anything. I slapped the quarters into Debbie's hand and she ran off again. This time I watched her until I couldn't see her anymore. I didn't want her or anyone else sneaking up on me. I wriggled like a snake shedding its skin, uncomfortable and scared. When I knew she was gone and would be for a few minutes as she tried to get a hold of Valerie, I turned back toward the school. The fact that I was alone out there hit me like a slap in the face. Bravado only goes so far. I clutched tightly to the baseball bat and stared past the school at the reeds. They seemed to stare back. I tried to will Debbie to hurry. The reeds waved in the breeze and whispered their strange words, calling me over to them. We never did check, I thought with a frown. I should at least look, right? What if she's hurting there somewhere and needs help? Reluctantly, I started toward the creek at the back of the school. The wind increased, howling like a wolf at the moon. Leaves lifted from everywhere and slapped against me. Now that I think back on it, I wonder if they were trying to stop me, to warn me away. If they were, I didn't listen. "Come," said the reeds. "Come to us. Come see what we have to show you. Come look. Come." My instincts told me to cut and run. Debbie would find Val and everything would be okay. Just get the hell out of there. But my body didn't listen. I kept approaching those reeds with slow, deliberate steps. Caw, caw, shouted the crow. Come, whispered the reeds. Look. The breeze whistled and moaned like a woman in agony. I walked forward until I couldn't anymore. My legs stopped moving. I tried to force them, but they wouldn't budge. It was like two strong hands had broken the earth and reached up from underneath to seize my ankles and hold me in place. What's happening? I whispered. I was staring at the blowing reeds when they grew impossibly still. The whispers fell into silence. Thick, tangible silence. Before my eyes, the reeds parted like the curtains at a stage show, moving to open the scene. I no longer wanted to see what was behind them, and I tried to turn my head to look away, and I couldn't move my head any more than I could my legs. Phantom hands grasped my jaw and held it, forcing my face forward. I couldn't fight against it no matter how hard I tried. And God, did I try? Tears rolled from the corners of my eyes. There was a man standing before me, unmasked by the reeds that moved aside. He was menacing, to say the least, and held a limp girl in his arms, draped over backward like they were in a dance competition. I had never been so afraid in my life, for one particular reason. I have aphantasia. I didn't know what it was called back then, or that it even had a name, but it means I can't visualize things. I can't imagine things in pictures. I can't daydream in images. My dreams at night are as black as this fateful autumn evening. I couldn't even close my eyes and picture the face of my own mother or someone I saw every day. So seeing these people behind the reeds right at that moment meant either they were real and it was currently happening, or I didn't want to. Think about the or. He had a weathered gray Stetson casting a shadow over his eyes, a button-down shirt and a bolo tie. His sleeves were rolled up and a thick, wide scar cut through the Celtic cross tattoo on his tanned forearm. His fist held the thin fabric of the young woman's baby doll dress, fluffy and pink. His other hand held a bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey that he sipped from. It was almost empty, and just a small bit sloshed at the bottom when he took it, away from his mouth. There were dark stains on the glass. Was it blood? The girl's face was already bruised and swollen. Her hands clawed at his chest weakly like her heart wanted to fight, but her body didn't have the strength left to comply. I knew I should help her. I needed to help her, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was watch, and my heart broke in my chest. Then the man's head turned. It was unnatural, like he was a marionette whose string had been tugged. I would have gasped if I could have. Her head turned too, her piercing blue eyes stabbing me like knives. Her mouth fell open and she croaked out a plea for help, but it was unintelligible. It was the bizarre whispering of the reeds. Then the man lifted the thick glass bottle and started to bash the girl in the face. I was desperate to move, to at the very least look away and not watch this horrible brutality, but I wasn't given a choice. When at last he dropped her in a crumpled, broken heap, her pink dress stained red, the reeds closed once more, and the horror movie ended. The reeds. I'll never forget that day. For so many years I've thought about it, about her, and wished for answers. I doubt I'll ever get any. I know I won't. From time to time I go back to New York to visit my dad or friends, and I consider going back there, but I never have the courage to actually do it. I'll just ride past it in the car and stare out the window like I've seen a ghost, because I have. Let me take you back with me this time and start from the beginning. October 1993, Baldwin, Long Island, New York. I was far from popular and only just starting to find my own and build my circle of friends in my junior year of high school. I was a shy kid with anxiety, but I was also built with strong values and integrity. I wanted to take care of people and help wherever I could, which is important because it plays a big part in how this all came to be. My friend, we'll call her Valerie, had some self-esteem issues like the rest of us misfit toys. But she was a good person and didn't have a mean bone in her body. It was hard for her to stand up for herself, and she was physically small too, which only made everyone that much more frightening. She had been trying to date outside of school to find someone not connected to the people we knew, someone she could be herself with, and back then the internet wasn't really a thing. People didn't even have cell phones unless they were a doctor or a drug dealer. We had pagers and we got messages alerting us that people wanted to talk, and then we ran to the nearest payphone to call them and see what they urgently wanted. This is also important to the story. I had another friend back then, a girl named Debbie. I'm still friends with her today. It was fall and cold, the ghostly breeze whipping the golden leaves from the trees that lined the roads. It was my favorite time of year, and I loved sitting outside and listening to the wind, as if it were the voices of spirits calling to me. It wasn't a ghost that called me that night, though. It was Debbie. I didn't hear the phone because I was outside, contemplative, enjoying the season, and writing lyrics to what would be my next rock song. The screen door opened with a creak and my mother's head poked outside. "What are you doing out here? You're not even wearing a jacket. You're gonna get sick. Come inside, huh?" "I'm fine, Ma," I said back. "Well, you gotta come in anyway. Debbie is on the phone." "Oh. Well, that was a different matter. If a friend was calling me at night, they probably needed me, and I never wanted to let anyone down. When Debbie had trouble with a bully, I took him on. I had been the quiet kid before that, and I was even recognized in the yearbook for it, but there was no avoiding everyone after that. I had gotten suspended for inciting a riot, and people changed the words on my Ned's Atomic Dustbin shirt to say, "Kill your bullies," instead of "kill your television." It wasn't very creative, and no bullies died, thankfully, but one did catch a walloping. Debbie and I had been friends already, but we would be lifelong friends after that. I got up and hurried into the house. My mom pointed to the phone on the table, a mustard yellow coiled cord draping from the wall into the seat nearby. She went to resume her seat on the couch in front of the TV. My mother had her scheduled programming mapped out, and a planner with what shows came on what nights at what times and which ones were more important to watch. And when she couldn't decide, she had a VCR that my brother had to program for her to record her shows because she couldn't figure it out. To be fair, I didn't know the first thing about it outside of play, record stop, and rewind. She took up her vigil in front of the TV, White Russian in hand, and I went into the kitchen to answer the phone. "Hey," I said, sitting at the table. "It's Valerie," Debbie said, sounding panicked. Immediately, I abandoned my seat and walked around the corner toward the back door, stretching that phone cord until there wasn't a single coil left in it. "What do you mean?" "What's wrong?" I asked, her worry contagious. "Valerie met this guy. He's a college guy and creepy, and he wanted to date her, and she was so happy to have the attention that she said yes." "All right," I said. "Don't panic yet. Maybe he's a good guy." I swear I could hear her shake her head. "He's not. He gives me the creeps, and Chisto, he isn't coming to pick her up. He asked her to meet him at the elementary school on Mornave." "Okay, that's a little weird," I admitted. "Why would a college guy with a car want the high school girl to meet him at a dark school after hours?" "Exactly," she exclaimed, her fear palpable. "It's not safe out there without a creepy college guy, never mind with him. We have to do something." I nodded my agreement and then realized she couldn't see it. Life is so much easier now with video chatting. "Yeah." "Nope. Yeah, I agree," I said. "Can you get out? I'll get my bat and head over there. It's pretty close to my house and I can get there fast. If she's in danger, I'll keep her safe, I promise." "Yeah, I'll meet you there. See you in a few," she said, immediately hanging up. I walked back to the base on the wall and hung my phone up as well. I went around the corner into my room and seized my Louisville Slugger. Then I checked on my mom, who was focused on the TV. "I'm running out to help Debbie with something, Ma. I'll be back in a few minutes, promise." "Take your jacket so you don't end up with pneumonia," she said without turning to look at me. Someone on TV was telling a criminal to stop or they would shoot. I grabbed my jacket off the back of a chair at the dining room table and raced out the door. The school wasn't far from my house, but I was still nervous because Valerie's house was even closer to it, and I didn't know when she left to meet this guy or what he or his car looked like. It didn't take a grown man long to hurt a girl. I walked as fast as I could, and the wind swirled around me like it was physically following me. Leaves swirled around me like I was a mini cyclone, ripping them from the ground as I hurried by. It didn't take me long to get to the school. I'd only seen it during the day, and I never went there, as I only moved to Baldwin for high school, so I had no fond childhood memories connecting me to the place. Seeing it now, in the pitch black night, it looked seriously ominous. The windows were covered in construction paper, which only served to make it darker. I swallowed a lump in my throat and slowed my pace, walking slowly toward the front of the school. There was a creek behind it, covered in tall reeds, so it was obscured from view, but the water brought an even stronger breeze. The reeds swayed back and forth like jaundiced skeletons waving at me mockingly. "Hey," Debbie called, making me jump out of my skin. With a hand on my heart, I turned to look at her. She grinned and said, "Sorry, I thought you saw me." "I can't see anything," I said. "I can't believe how dark it is." "Right? It's creepy out here, but that was exactly my point. Why in the hell would this guy Carrie want to meet Valerie here of all places?" I paid a glance toward the creepy school and nodded. "Yeah, no, you're right. It's definitely shady. Have you seen her at all, or spoken to her?" I tried to call, but I only got her mother, who said she'd already left and I didn't want to freak her out, so I didn't tell her why I was worried. I figured we had it under control. Apparently, she told her mom she was going out to meet me, which is true, but Valerie didn't know that. I could choke her using me for her lies when she's going out to meet some creeper by the murder creek in the middle of the damn night. "Yeah," was all I said. I crossed the street, and Debbie followed until we both stood in the grass on Morn School grounds. There was a stone bench and I pointed at it. "Let's split up and look for Val. We'll meet back at this bench in a few minutes." "Sounds good." The last thing I wanted to do was walk all around that creepy-ass school by myself, or send Debbie to do the same. But if Valerie really was in trouble, we needed more chances to find her and rescue her. I felt better when I realized that Debbie had brought a bat of her own. Great minds think alike. If this guy really was up to no good like she suspected, then we were going to have a home run derby and make sure he regretted his choices. We walked opposite ways around the giant building, towards those waving reeds. The way the wind whistled through them, they sounded like they were whispering and laughing, and it made me shiver. They had to be taller than my dad, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. A crow squawked from somewhere and I couldn't see the black bird in the dark of night, so it made me jump. I could hear Debbie calling for Valerie, her voice getting quieter as she got further away from me, though Debbie was someone who could definitely project. She was always loud and boisterous, and I grew to love it. I didn't call for Valerie as I went the other way. If this guy was on top of her or something, I didn't want him to know I was coming until it was too late, and he was within swinging range. If he was hurting her, I was not going to let him out of there so easily. I didn't see anyone, and I was afraid of passing them in the dark. Nowadays, I would just turn on the flashlight on my cell phone, but I didn't have that option back then. I just had to squint through the dark and hope my eyes would adjust. I walked slowly and quietly and bent down to see close to the ground. I looked behind the trash cans and bushes, behind the trees and behind the bike rack. I didn't see Valerie, or anyone for that matter. All I saw were leaves dancing on the wind, while the reeds laughed at me for being frightened. I flipped up my middle finger at them. The wind resumed and a leaf slapped me in my tear-wet cheek. I peeled it away and threw it to the ground, my heart racing. I waited for something else, but there was nothing. I noticed the bat I was carrying was on the ground in front of me, lying in the grass. I shivered and realized I wasn't wearing my coat anymore. "Hey," Debbie said, and I screamed. "Whoa, you okay? Why aren't you wearing your coat? It's freezing." I don't know," I said honestly, bending to pick it up. "Sorry it took so long, but the only payphone was at Buttafuoco's shop and I had to page her and wait for her to call back. But the good news is she's okay. She made it halfway here and got scared, so she turned back. She's home. I guess he realized she wasn't coming because he must have left too." "Yeah, that's good," I said, shrugging my coat on. My eyes kept moving to the reeds, though. I couldn't help it. I walked over to them now that my legs were willing to let me, and Debbie walked with me. "Yeah," she said as we reached them. "That's why I was so scared. A girl was killed behind these reeds last year. She met a guy at a bar with a fake ID, and he ended up beating her to death with a liquor bottle. Scary stuff, man. I heard he was never caught." My head whipped around hard enough to give me whiplash. I stared at her. "Are you serious right now?" "Yeah," That's why I was freaking out. I thought you knew. Everyone knew. I didn't. No, I didn't know. What's going on with you? You look like you've seen a ghost. I looked away from her and pulled the reeds open like the curtains they showed me they were. Behind them was grass littered with bottles, cans, empty chip bags, and condom wrappers. Beyond that was the creek, flowing by peacefully. I looked back at Debbie as I let the reeds fall closed, and I said, I think maybe I did.